Before to start, I would like to also thank the organizers for the invitation and to congratulate all of them, and also Mr. Γκέρτσης for this initiative. I think it's the right time. I'm really wondering why they are absent the state of Greece in order to hear what are the problems facing the sector. In any case, this section will be on mechanical harvesting, and we are very happy to have here the very distinguished expert, Mrs. Ferguson, which will speak on mechanical harvesting on table olives, pruning, Abscission, harvesters, and post-harvest. Please,
Thank
you have the floor.
I prefer to walk around when I present, so, and I like to use the pointer. So perhaps you might want to move this way because I'm going to focus on this screen, since I can't use my pointer on both screens, okay? So first of all, I'm going to continue the last session and say that change is the one thing that we know is really going to happen. Change is inevitable, whether it's in climate, technology, crops. So you can either be part of it or you can be left behind. My grandmother said only dead men and fools never change their minds. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is one of the great revolutions in agriculture. There have been 5 great revolutions in agriculture. The first was draft animals, uses of mules, horses, oxen. The second was Mendelian genetics, the use of traditional breeding. The third revolution was the Industrial Revolution, the use of engines. It actually affected agriculture more than any other industry in the world at the time. The next great revolution was chemicals. Fertilizers, growth regulators, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, bactericides. And the final revolution, the one that we hear people saying, sometimes poo-pooing, is molecular techniques. What I'm going to talk about today is how olives, one of the oldest crops in the world, has not significantly participated in the greatest revolution of the 3 thus far. They used draft animals. They used Mendelian genetics a little. They used chemicals greatly, fertilizers, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, and now we're starting to use molecular techniques. But the oldest crop, practically the oldest crop in the world, olives, basically missed the Industrial Revolution. I mean, we use tractors, we use plows, but in terms of actually raising the tree, the Industrial Revolution has not really affected olives. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. We're going to talk about mechanical harvesting of table olives. Okay? The work I'm going to show you here is going to be a broad overview of what's actually happening today in table olive research. I'll show you the references, the things are supported by, but this is going to be a broad overview. And it's going to be a synthesis of the work of myself and my global cooperators. First, University of Cordoba, Dr. Sergio Castro Garcia. University of California at Merced, Dr. Riza Essani, formerly from University of Tehran. Arnon Dag and Gioria Ben Ari, both of Bet Dagan in Israel. And of course, no good team is complete without its women. This is the team from the University of Sevilla, led by Dr. Pilar Rayu. I had the pleasure of knowing this woman when she was about 3 years old. Her father came to do a sabbatical with me at University of California, and now she's an olive scientist just like her father. Okay, the major problem in table olives today is this. It's hand harvest costs. Olives are a processing crop. All of us know that processing crops have a very low profit margin. The only way we're going to make table olives more profitable is by decreasing our inputs at this point in time. Okay? This is what we use in California. These are our manual harvesters. And the problem with these men is, there's no problem with the men per se, they're nice people, but increasingly due to immigration laws, they are not available. Second, to be fair to them and make them have a living wage, they are literally not affordable. They're hard. We cannot produce olives and still pay them enough to have a decent living. And the second thing is ability. I've now been working with harvesting of olives in California for 30 years, and I can tell you that the first generation that comes in are very good and hardworking, but then they educate their children. Their children don't want to do this. So either we have more immigrants, which under the political climate in my country is not going to happen. I don't know about yours, but I do know the second generation doesn't want to do this. It's hard work. Okay? And this is the economics of olive production in my country. Basically, hand harvesting costs can be over 50% of the total costs of production. That is not a sustainable model. Okay? And this is the effect of manual harvesting in California right now. This acreage, this is about 125 hectares. That's almost 1% of our industry being pulled out of the ground, being sold. Actually, what's going to happen to that ground is they'll put in pistachios or almonds, much more profitable crops in California right now, and crops that are mechanically pruned and mechanically harvested. So the economics of table olives at this point are that we must develop mechanical harvesting. In all its forms, there are alternatives, and we have to develop it for the trees we have, the trees we can adapt from typical orchards, the moderate density orchards that we hope to develop, and eventually, possibly, super high density orchards. So we basically have a situation where we have to understand the mechanics of mechanical harvesting. Dr. Yoav Zareg, probably the dean of mechanical harvesting from Israel, has said, there can be no developing mechanical harvesting without adapting the orchard. So developing mechanical harvesting is kind of like developing a machine with gears. At the same time, you must develop the machine, the harvester, what we maybe call the removal technology. At the same time, At the same time, you must adapt the tree. This gear can't turn without turning this gear. And if we're lucky, perhaps we can also develop an Abscission agent, an agent that decreases the fruit removal force. Because the reality of olives is that for most table olives, we harvest the olives physiologically immature. The Abscission zone has not developed. Fruit removal force is almost as much as half a kilo for an individual olive. For anything under 3 grams, that's almost impossible to remove. So, for developing mechanical harvesting, just like any other change in any other project, but increasingly or specifically in agriculture, you need to have an overall strategy. And your overall strategy has to have short-term goals, what I can do right now to stay profitable. It has to have midterm goals, what I can do in the meantime, start working on in the midterm, and finally, long-term goals. What is really going to solve my problem in the long term? For mechanical harvesting, our short-term goals are we need to develop harvesting or adapt harvesting technology probably from other industries right now. We need to adapt the existing orchards, the ones that are in the ground now. As the gentleman here said, we can't go pulling out all these trees right now. We have to use the ones we've got. And we can at least evaluate the Abscission compounds on the market right now. Our midterm goal, we should be developing new orchards that are more adaptable to mechanical harvesting, and we should be working with the physiology of abscission. Exactly how does it work, so maybe we can adapt better to it, instead of just trying what we call spray and pray. Spray something on, see if it works. And then finally, the long-term goal, this is molecular. This is going to be that we're going to change that tree in the long term, but everybody knows that's going to take at least 10, 20, maybe even 30 years. So in the meantime, we'll be traditional and molecular breeding of mechanically harvestable cultivars. Where are we on all this stuff? For our short-term goals, I'm going to show you what we're working on right now. We are adapting harvesters from other crops, we are adapting orchards, and we are evaluating abscission compounds, even though it's not very serious work. The midterm goal, we are developing new orchards, moderate and super high density, and in a very recent project in Israel, they are examining the physiology of abscission, examining abscission compounds that loosen fruit removal force without removing the leaves, which have a lesser abscission with ethylene. And in the long term, there has been a program in breeding for harvestable cultivars started in Sevilla. Okay, so now we're going to start going through the specifics. I'm going to walk through the specifics of developing a mechanical harvesting program. All the steps can be found in this paper, which came out about 4 years ago now, by myself and Sergio Castro Garcia in Spain. Okay? So first, when you develop mechanical harvesting, I got to push this thing back. You have to develop a removal method. That means you have to develop a prototype machine, usually the one-off. You can usually borrow a machine also from the existing industry. After you develop a removal method, the first things you must do are, and I'm going to use this thing, you're going to have to ensure it produces a marketable fruit, a fruit that you can sell and make money. If it doesn't produce a marketable fruit, it's not functional. Then you have to demonstrate that the technology does not harm the tree. If it harms the tree, there's no function in developing it. Simultaneously, you have to adapt the trees and the orchard for more efficient harvesting and work with the parameters of harvesting, the ground speed, the mechanics of the machine to make sure it's efficient, make sure the fruit is getting into the catch frame, not falling on the ground. And then here is one of the hardest steps of all, which is commercial harvester fabrication. Universities develop technology. We do not develop turnkey machines, meaning one that you can sell a grower. It's at this point that the commercial industry must come in and cooperate with us. And frankly, it's one of our biggest problems in California because our table olive industry now is about 14,000 acres. That would be about 7,000 hectares, about 6,000 hectares of olives in California. When I take a machine to a commercial fabricator and say, I'd like you to build this for me, he says, 14,000 acres? Are you kidding? You know, I'm going to go build a machine for pistachios or almonds. There's 300,000 or 1 million acres of those. Okay? So let's start with the harvester. There are basically, at this point in time, for tree fruits and tree nuts, 2 removal methods. There are the trunk shaking harvesters, adapted from prunes and pistachios, where basically the force is delivered to the trunk of the tree. And then there are the canopy contact harvesters, where the force is delivered directly into the canopy, up where the fruit is. Okay? And they're generally adapted from grapes. Okay, we're going to start with trunk shaking harvesters. This is an adapted pistachio harvester. It's a 2-part machine. It costs roughly $750,000 to $1 million for one of these sets of what we call doubles. Basically, it's one wing on one side. Where's my little thing? One wing on one side, one wing on the other. The shaking mechanism is down in here. The olives are shaken down onto this deck, delivered up, and into a bin. Actually, the bin is in the front. This is a spare bin.
this is basically the working part of the machine. It's these two pads clamp onto the tree trunk. They're mounted inside these two wings, like this, that then close around the tree and also close the alleyway on either side of the tree so olives don't drop on the ground. And then this is what it looks like from the back. The olives basically come down here, trail up here, go into a bin up there. Trunk shaking harvesters deliver force very, very well vertically, less well horizontally, and very poorly in a downward direction. So the biggest problem with trunk shaking harvesters is the closer the fruit is to the origin of the shake, the better the machine functions. But as the force travels here, here, and here, it decreases very much. The other thing about this is you need a tree that doesn't have a very thick canopy because the volume of the foliage will make less the force of the harvester. It's this kind of harvesting that would benefit most from an Abscission compound, from something that decreases the fruit removal force. It gave me all my stuff right away. I don't want that. For this kind of harvester, you need a short, upright tree with very stiff branches. This tree has been modified with mechanical harvesting to have major uprights. Modified with mechanical pruning. We basically hedged the sides of the tree, we topped the tree, and we do that, but we top it, or we hedge it every other row, every other year, and we top every year. We found that we have to top every year to control the height, and we have to have a clear trunk down here to get the catch frame under the tree. We basically used adapted pistachio and prune harvesters, and this is what it would look like in operation. These are the kind of parameters after several years of trials that we got out of the machine. We used it in a moderate density, 180 trees to the acre, or 443 trees to the hectare. When the operator was trained, he could do a tree about every 30 to 40 seconds, about 90 to 120 trees to the hour. That meant he could do about a quarter of a hectare in an hour, and we got 78% final harvester efficiency. So in a 5,000 ton to the acre crop, or ton to the hectare crop, we were taking off 4 tons. It was worth it at that rate for the grower to send in hand gleaners afterwards. This is how they're loaded down. They come off, down over here, and into this bin. However, we still don't even want to have hands in the orchard. A machine like this can take 2 men. You generally have to have 1 man driving it, another man driving the other side, it takes 3 men, another man driving the other side, and 1 person walking behind to pull these bins off when they're full and pull the next bin into position. We found we could increase the efficiency by adapting the machine in this fashion. You see this area up here? First I'll show you the quality we got. Basically, the quality of the olives at the receiving station, that's where we get the quality of our olives. They were 95% acceptable for canning. So the olives at the receiving station where they were looked at were acceptable for canning. Of course, you can see marks on them, things like this. But here's hand-harvested olives. They have marks on them, too. One of the ways that they tried to improve this machine was they found, both the researchers in Israel and the researchers in Spain and ourselves, have found if you can put an upper deck on the machine, this is up on the top, so this is, we'll go back here, sorry. This section right here, we added a deck and put 4 people up there with handheld rakes, those kind of rakes that have fingers that go like this. Okay? So we put 4 men. Now that means we've got 6 men out there on a machine because there's 2 on the, we got 7 men out there because we've got 4 up on these upper decks, these 2 guys right here, and there's 2 on the other side. And what they're doing is as the machine shakes, they are raking downward. We found we could increase the efficiency about 10 to 12% with that. There are some other problems with handheld shakers, with trunk shakers. Because the olive trunks are very uneven and have a lot of different surfaces, sometimes you have to clamp very low on the trunk. When you clamp low on the trunk, your force is not traveling upward. It's not traveling this way. Your force is being transmitted into the ground. Now this ruffling of the ground and exposing of roots hasn't been proven to be any big problem. Basically, you just irrigate right after harvest. But the problem is the force is not going where you need it, up the tree. So basically, this kind of trunk shaking with these extra men is good for an orchard up to 10 to 15 years, a manzanillo orchard in California, but it is not a long-term solution. Then there's this problem. If you irrigate like we do to within 1 week of harvest, or you have a poor shaker operator who basically does not stop and clamp very well before he starts shaking, you're going to get this problem. You're going to get this problem. You're going to start to get barking of the tree, and we're starting to see this increasingly. You have to have a very well-trained shaker operator to avoid this situation. And according to my Spanish colleagues, our trees are just too soft. We irrigate too much. Okay? Sergio Castro Garcia has recently produced some data with the same situation, except he's using what we call an almond knocker. It's a machine that basically pulls up to the tree. Here are the kinds of hand-vibrated rakes all his men use. They have to wear these, they have to wear harnesses to put them on. So he's basically got 5 men around here, around the tree. The biggest problem I see with this is this. It's collection of the olives. Not to mention the guys are stomping all over the olives the whole time down here. So even though he achieved a field capacity, just like ourselves, he's getting about 2 hectares per hour. They're doing 2 shakes on the tree, 4 to 6 seconds. These are very strong shakers, these almond shakers, at a frequency just about what we use, 27 hertz. He got a fruit removal of over 95%. But my attitude is, when you do mechanical harvesting, you want continuous motion. You want to be able to move down that row. It's hard enough to stop with the other machine. But this business of all the olives on the ground having to be picked up, that makes the process totally inefficient. However, the wind removal technology does work. So for trunk shaking harvesters, here's what we've come up with thus far. It's a solution for about 15 years. You need about 70 to 100 centimeters of trunk. That's Leandro Ravetti. Basically, you're going to work in the range of 23 to 27 hertz as your frequency. Earlier versions, we got 77% efficiency. But like Sergio Castro Garcia, once we started to put people on that raked the canopy at the same time that we were shaking the trunks, we could get that up to 90, with him 95. The fruit quality is excellent. It's fine for harvesting. However, there is trunk damage. And if you try to decrease the trunk damage with additional padding, it decreases the efficacy of the harvester. So bottom line, trunk shaking is not a long-term solution. Okay? So let's go back to, that was the conclusion on trunk shaking harvesters. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. Trunk shaking harvesters would benefit greatly from abscission agents. The major abscission agent that has been used is ethithon. It basically is a natural plant hormone that increases the normal ethylene cascade that olives have. The problem is olives are physiologically immature, table olives, when we start to harvest them. And the other big problem is the leaf abscission zone is much more sensitive to ethylene than the fruit detachment zone of the 3 detachment zones. So there's been some major work in abscission agents. About 10 years ago, Jackie Burns from University of Florida, the woman who is, she's now a dean of Florida, but she basically was the dean of abscission agents, along with Manslitz. We did a review of everything we could find in California and Israel, including the 2 top candidates, Ethafon at 1,000 parts per million, and Ethafon combined with monopotassium phosphate, or Harvest Vant in Israel. And basically what we found out was that yes, we could decrease the fruit removal force within 10 to 17 days, but leaf drop increased to over the 25% that you can accept and have a healthy tree. So then there's this recent research, just in the past 2 years, by Arnon Dog and Gioria Ben Ari from Israel and Shavon Levi, that showed basically that if you buffered the Ethafon down to 5.5% using ascorbic or butyric acid, you could decrease the leaf loss. You got the same level of decrease in fruit removal force, but the leaf loss was mitigated. You didn't lose as many leaves. We tried this last year. It didn't work, but we're going to try it again. So at this point in time, we still cannot effectively use Ethafon. We're still getting unacceptable leaf loss with fruit removal force. Okay? So as far as I'm concerned, at this point in time, we have no effective abscission agents. Okay. Now we're going to talk about canopy contact harvesters, basically adapted from grapes, though I am going to show you a harvester that's a little bit different than the grape harvester you're going to see at the end. Okay? One of the big mistakes everybody makes when they start developing mechanical harvesting is they develop the machine for the tree they have. This was the first harvester I worked with. It's embarrassing even to look at the thing. But it had 2 sides like this. We worked with this for 4 years. We even were very proud of ourselves. We put a little GPS up here and we put a little weight down here so that we could get the weight of each tree as we went down the row. And basically what this machine did was mangle trees and break them up. But what we finally did was the value of this machine for us was we used it to show where these heads and these surfaces were producing damage. Because basically when we first started, this is what hand-harvested fruit looked like. This is what mechanically harvested fruit looked like. And even though in California, most of our fruit is processed into black ripe, we can hide some bruises. Some of them are still too deep to have a processed olive. So basically what we did was we did a lot of very high-speed films to demonstrate where the olives, this was a camera, did a lot of high-speed films, 500 feet per second, to demonstrate where the olives were going in the tree, what they were hitting, and then we collect them at different points in the harvest process. So we did a lot of very short little videos following individual olives to see if they were hitting the rods, if they were hitting the branches, or if they were hitting parts of the machine. And basically what we found out was these rods were producing a good 20% of the damage, and we solved it by padding it with a different kind of padding. It was called Shore 20A. It's padding that has a lot of resilience, that absorbs the blow instead of like batting it. It just lets the olive sink into the rod. Okay? Then what we did with all our olives was we had them, sadly enough, we only have 2 major commercial processors in California. I know that's hard to believe in Greece and Spain. But we have Bell Carter and we have Musco. And then this was the University of California Postharvest lab. We would take our olives after harvest and we would divide the ones from each tree. We'd send one to one processor, one to the other processor, and one to University of California at Davis to be graded. And they tell us what the olives were worth. We would also have the olives tested by a trained, and I guess starting to run out of time, by a trained, oh my heavens, what am I going to do? Okay, by a trained sensory panel, same thing as an olive panel. They basically had all their different samples of olives here. They had a grading sheet with good and bad qualities. They had crackers, I think, and they had water to clear their palate. This is just like a wine panel or an olive oil tasting panel. They tell you what's good, they tell you what's bad, they tell you what they like, they tell you what you don't like, okay? Oh, excuse me, this is like an olive oil panel. They tell you the characteristics. Then, we have a big picnic day every year at Davis, and we had consumer preference panels. We had people brought in, we gave them the mechanically harvested and the hand harvested olives, and we said, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. So this was a way for consumers to say what they liked about our mechanically versus hand harvested olives. And this is a principal component analysis that analyzes it. Basically, I will explain it for you here. Over here is the negative characteristics, over here is the positive characteristics. Purple is hand harvested. Blue is machine harvested. This stands for stored olives. These were stored in brine. These stand for processed as soon as they came in, fresh, fresca. And A and B stands for the two different processors. What we learned was, one, our consumers could not tell hand-harvested olives from machine-harvested olives. They could not tell processor B from processor A, but they sure could tell olives that were processed as soon as they were harvested compared to olives that had been stored in brine. But the real lesson is they couldn't tell the difference between hand or mechanical harvested. So we have a machine here, and this was true for both the trunk shaking and the canopy contact shaking. We had a machine that the consumers could not tell the difference in the olives. And what did I do there? Okay. So then what we did with this machine was we realized we had a machine that's too big. We just took off this head and had adapted it down to a smaller machine. In California, I have only a few growers that have very large acreage. They are not going to buy $1 million machine. So basically what we did was we took this head off and we mounted it to a rented bobcat. So this means the grower could have his own little machine and rent a bobcat for the power takeout, which means the machine would be in good shape because it wasn't sitting in his barn all year. We found we could fabricate this head for about $50,000. So a small grower could have one or two. It's better to have two because you want compression. A big grower could have 10. But the major thing is it didn't cost $50,000. Now remember, this is still a prototype. There's only one of these that exists. The other thing we found out working with this technology in a different kind of machine called the Ag-Rite Olivia was that compression really matters. You get better removal if you can compress the canopy. So basically, what we came up with is a machine like this should be operated as a set of two. You need one on each side of the row going down the row simultaneously. Okay? So basically, at this point in time, we have a canopy contact harvester that gave us about 80 to 90% removal, and this is the kind of tree that it really needs. It needs a tree that, I used to think 3.7 meters, now I think 3 meters. We want a canopy that's no more than 2 meters wide, and we want a canopy that is brought up from the ground about 1 meter for the catch frame when we finally develop one. Okay? These are about 490 trees to the hectare, moderate density trees. We try to train the trees within the row like this. We call it palmate, but increasingly now we're just letting them go central leader because we're finding out that they just naturally sort of form this palmate shape. What you need for a machine like this is you need a fruiting waterfall. You need the fruit to be all in the same plane and falling off the sides like this. You need the fruit to be in the same plane so that when the harvester goes down the row, you don't have to move the head in and out. And the way you're going to get that is with mechanical pruning. You're going to hedge the middles of the rows every other year, and we found it's best just to top the rows every year. They're finding now with super high density in California that you need to top every year to control the height. Okay? So at this point in time, this little prototype gives us about 90% efficiency at about 45 seconds to the tree. It moves quite slowly. That's about 0.15 hectare per hour. Okay, now I'm just going to tell you what's going on a couple other places. This is the program in Sevilla. They have started to do super high density. They are adapting the browed grape harvesters. These harvesters have a different technology. This is not the same row of tines inside the machine. This is bow rod technology. The bow rods are very taut rods that vibrate against the tree like this. We have just found in California, particularly with Koroniki and Arbosana, two oil varieties, there is a new fungal disease called neofibroma. Did I say that right, Dan? Neofibrea, yeah. There's a new disease that is very much exacerbated by this kind of harvesting technology. I am not fond of over-the-row harvesters. They're too big, they're too expensive, they limit the size of your trees. When I can make a little machine for two little heads for less than $100,000, I'm not willing to spend close to $500,000 for this machine, and I have seen too much branch damage from these bow rods. However, with manzanilla and with table olive cultivars, they are getting good removal efficiencies. The only thing I'd say about this data is that she said the hand harvesters get 100%. I have never seen a hand harvesting crew get 100%. Okay? They are also working at Sevilla with the different kinds of bruises that you see both on the surface and deep in the fruit. So at Sevilla, they have a very nice program going determining how bruising is produced in fruit and how they can perhaps ameliorate it with immediate post-harvest treatments. And finally, at Sevilla, they do have a breeding program going, just as the breeding program that produced the olive oil cultivars that are faster growing, crop up sooner, and have more highly dissected branches. They have a breeding program now started in 2003 for mechanically harvested trees. It is traditional breeding, but they're also going to incorporate molecular techniques. And that is the review of mechanical harvesting globally with all my cooperators. So basically, this is where we are. We have our short-term goals that we've been working on. They're starting to move more into the physiology of abscission and developing new orchards, and we are just starting traditional and molecular breeding for increasing the possibility of mechanical harvesting. And I'll leave you with this picture. Anybody who does mechanical harvesting research sees things like this all the time. This is sunset or sunrise while you're waiting for the harvester to get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. L.Ferguson. I'll make sure I will call you this semester to teach my class on this. Any question from the audience? Comments, question, ideas? This is a very new topic, so probably you haven't seen anything of this in Greece yet, except some mechanical harvesting for olive oil production. We do have it.
Yes.
We have very few here. 4 machines so far in Greece for olive oil harvesting. And one is coming every year here in this college because we have one of the very unique super high density and medium density research station. We are all welcome to visit. It's right behind this building.
So I have a question. Do you have problems with labor availability or cost in Greece?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That must be the growers talking. This. Well,
It is the major,
son, it's the major problem in California. Thank you. It is killing the industry.
Well, this is a problem for all manual harvesting products. The labor is becoming intensive. Exactly as you pointed out, there are not skilled workers, and you can't have them when you need them. And let me tell you another big problem we have in Greece, and you will be surprised. They are stealing olives at night, especially in Chalkidiki, and that's a major problem.
Well, you know, picking the olives is so hard. They deserve it if they're going to pick them.
Well, okay, for Greece also it's a problem of cost for the machines,
Yes.
plus the shape of the trees.
Yeah.
So we need to move towards, but
Yeah.
adjusting many things.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, there is a question from the gentleman down there.
Stop talking.
Ναι, παρακαλώ.
Have you, I've read somewhere that research has been done with high frequency. I've read somewhere that research has been done with high frequency hitting the stem of the olive in order for the olive to drop. Are you aware of that? And if yes, any?
Yeah. That high frequency was actually what they called the Inertia Shaker. It was produced in California back in the 50s by Hank Studer, and the way it worked was it was just a one-time shaker. They basically would just hit the tree once, and it literally knocked the tree away from the olive. But it was not very efficient because for good mechanical harvesting, you need to keep moving. Anything where you have to stop at the tree longer than 10 seconds is not going to be economically feasible.
Now, what I had read was frequency hitting the stem itself, no mechanical shaking of the tree.
No, I haven't seen any high frequency, meaning literally that would be high pitched sound, I guess. They did have wind machines that had a wing that moved up and down like this, so the wind would hit it, then move, and hit it, and move, and hit it, move, and it would cause the branch to go like this. The problem with that is it blew the olives like 3 rows over. So, and it was an extremely heavy machine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Papachadzis has a question in the front row, please.
Do you think that it's necessary to develop new clones or new varieties that can adapt better to this mechanical harvesting? And I mean the mechanical harvesting not with shaking the trunks, but by moving.
You mean new clones for the climate, you mean?
Like Arbequina I-18 or Koroniki I-38.
So the olive oil industry really had 3 wonderful things happen. They had cultivars that cropped up early, stayed small, which means they need a smaller machine, and basically could also have crops sooner. And then they had they could adapt the grape machines plus the mechanical pruning machines. It would be nice in olives if we could do that, but I've worked enough with olive trees that I know they're also very plastic trees. They respond really well to adaptation, and we really don't need those, as they call them up in Italy, the old men of Apulia, those huge trees. They can be cut back so that they have very small canopies, or some of those trees with the big old canopies, that technology of the head, it can go in those canopies and just circle around the tree. November of 15, there was a show of different machines at Sevilla and Cordoba with Sergio Castro Garcia, and they showed very effective harvesting of those big old trees with those tines that went in the tree, and the machine just circled around it. So they actually had continuous, fairly efficient harvesting with a one-sided machine by Oxbow. So yes, it'd be nice to have new, smaller trees, but we can adapt the older ones pretty quickly.
Any other question? A very last question from the gentleman. Because we ran out of time a little bit, so I would like to, if you have any other questions, please have them in the break.
Λέγομαι Μπερτσιμάς, είμαι από Φθιώτιδα. Χρησιμοποιώ μια μηχανή από...
Ναι, προχωρήστε, εγώ θα κάνω τη μετάφραση.
Χρησιμοποιώ μια μηχανή από το 2007, από την Ισπανία, από την Αργουσίνη συγκεκριμένα την έχω αγοράσει, την έχω προσαρμόσει πάνω στο τρακτέρ, δεν πιάνει τη βάση του κορμού, ανεβαίνει επάνω στους κλόνους μέσα. Το άνοιγμα είναι 25 πόντους και έχω δει αρκετά, έχω χαμηλώσει το κόστος αρκετά. Βέβαια δεν χρησιμοποιώ ομπρέλα από κάτω, στορώνω τα δίχτυα και έχω δύο άτομα που μαζεύουν τα δίχτυα. Το ποσοστό που ρίχνω μαζεύω μόνο πράσινες ελιές, 70%, χωρίς χτυπήματα. Βέβαια δεν μπορώ να πάω σε ελαιοπερίβολα τα οποία είναι πλαγιές, είναι για επίπεδα. Ναι, μόνο επιτραπέζια.
Ποια ποικιλία? Χαλκιδικής ποικιλία.
Όχι, κονσερβολιά θηλίδας.
Κονσερβολιά, ωραία. Let's have one last question from the lady. Yes, please. Just a second, so they will bring you the microphone so we can all hear you.
The other problem of Greece is that most of the areas are not flat. So we have lots of hilly areas with the trees. So do you consider this, working in the hilly areas?
Yeah.
With this machinery, I mean?
Yeah. You know, basically a bobcat, the machine you saw that head up on, can negotiate some of those hills. And they're getting, with the tractors and things, they're getting much better. So you can have somewhat hilly terrain. I think I believe the number I heard was over 6 to 7%. It becomes a problem. Step slope.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ferguson. We will proceed in the next presentation.